Since the end of World War II, strategic bombers have remained the cornerstone of the American nuclear triad. And let's be honest, the U.S. clearly understands how to speak to the world in a language that's hard to miss, especially when that language is flying at 50,000 feet with nuclear weapons on board. Let's take a look at the deadliest U.S. bombers and try to figure out what's kept behemoths like the B-52 relevant for over 70 years. While Boeing rolled out nearly 4,000 B-29 Superfortresses in November of 1945, Air Materiel Command was busy writing down its wants for a new U.S. strategic bomber capable of replacing the good old Convair B-36 Peacemaker. The newly minted Iron Bird was required to have a speed of over 300 miles per hour at 34,000 feet, a combat radius of 5,000 miles, multiple 20mm cannons, and the ability to carry up to 10,000 pounds of bombs. And that was just the beginning. After all, just a year later, all of the above had increased to a speed of 400 miles per hour, a flight range of up to 12,000 miles, and the armament of the future aircraft was replenished with nuclear weapons. However, Boeing was not afraid of the obstacles and lifted its first Stratofortress into the sky in the spring of 1952. And 5 years later, 3 such devices set a record, having made the first non-stop flight around the world on a jet engine in 45 hours and 19 minutes. Today, this event is better known as Operation Power Flight. B-52s flew airborne patrols throughout the Cold War, including Operations Giant Lance, Chrome Dome, Head Start, Hardhead, Round Robin, and others. The aircraft patrolled at high altitudes near the Soviet Union's borders, providing a quick first strike or retaliatory strike capability in the event of a nuclear war. And although the threat to high-altitude aircraft would increase dramatically with the advent of surface-to-air missiles in the late 1950s, military command simply changed the B-52's approach to a potential conflict with the USSR. Now the aircraft had to penetrate at low altitudes and, by using terrain camouflage, effectively avoid radar as well as the threat of Soviet missiles, delivering weapons from an altitude of 400 feet or even lower. In addition to the obvious uses of the B-52 in conflict, they can be used for surveillance purposes. These bombers can be used for ocean surveillance as well as anti-ship and mine operations. Thus, just 2 Stratofortresses can cover down on 140,000 square miles of ocean surface in the span of 2 hours. Regular improvements to the B-52 Stratofortress have led us to the B-52H modification with a maximum speed of 650 miles per hour, a combat range of 8,800 miles, and a ceiling of 50,000 feet. And in the early 2030s, we'll see even cooler B-52Js with upgrades including improved communication systems, new pylons, cockpit displays, and APG-82 radar, and most importantly, new Rolls-Royce F-130 engines, which will keep the B-52 relevant until the 2050s, significantly reducing the cost of operating these giants and increasing their combat readiness. On the other hand, was there anyone who seriously thought that big, fat, ugly fellow would say goodbye to us in the 2030s? The B-1 Lancer, or Bone, could have appeared not much later than the old Stratofortress by the 1960s. However, due to the cancellation of the program in 1977 due to high costs, plans to develop a new heavy bomber were postponed until 1981. It was in this year that Ronald Reagan replaced President Carter and rightly decided that 2 bombers were better than 1. He chose not to choose between the B-1 Lancer plan and the Advanced Technology Bomber, ATB program, declaring that he would work on both at once and simultaneously announcing the purchase of 100 B-1s to fulfill the Long-Range Combat Aircraft, LRCA role. In 1982, the Lancer underwent a number of design changes to make it more suitable for future missions. The aircraft was slowed down, allowing it to replace variable aspect intake ramps on simpler fixed geometry intake ramps. This decision also greatly reduced the B-1B's radar signature on enemy radar, which was a good compromise in contrast to the reduction in the B-1 speed characteristics. The bomber could now fly at a speed of Mach 1.25 at high altitude, and at low altitude it received a slight increase from Mach 0.85 to Mach 0.92. But the maximum takeoff weight of the B-1B has become much more impressive, reaching 477,000 pounds versus 395,000 pounds for the B-1A. By the way, this is not much less than the Stratofortress, whose maximum takeoff weight in the B-52H modification is 488,000 pounds. At the same time, Rockwell engineers didn't lighten the bomber's airframe, quite the contrary. By strengthening critical areas and lightening non-critical areas of the airframe, the empty weight of the aircraft even increased slightly. Although originally designed for nuclear war, the B-1's development as an effective bomber was delayed shortly after the collapse of the Soviet Union, calling into question the Lancer's nuclear role as such, and leading to President George H.W. Bush ordering a $3 billion conversion of the existing B-1 fleet to conventional aircraft. The B-1B's nuclear capability was deactivated in 1995. crews modified the aircraft's hardpoints to prevent the attachment of nuclear weapons pylons, removed the weapons bay wiring harnesses for arming nuclear weapons, and destroyed the weapons pylons. The transformation process was completed in 2011. But is it final and irrevocable? Of course not. With geopolitical fissures rapidly widening around the world, the U.S. would certainly not deny itself the pleasure of equipping an additional 40 to 50 bombers with nuclear weapons, even if this is becoming less and less of a critical need against the backdrop of the inexorably approaching entry into service of the newest B-21 Raiders. But before we move on to Northrop's latest creation, we can't pass by their magnum opus, the B-2 Spirit. This legendary heavy strategic bomber has become a living embodiment of the term stealth in aviation, and its ominous triangular outline is a nightmare for all enemies of democracy. The Advanced Technology Bomber program, which was the beginning of the Spirit, began in 1979. The development of the Black Project was in full swing at 200% under the codename Aurora, and the main feature of the future aircraft was supposed to be maximum invisibility for enemy radars. The program was so secret that all personnel required top-secret clearance and underwent extensive background checks under the direction of a special unit of the U.S. Air Force. Ford's assembly plant in Pico Rivera, California has been rebuilt beyond recognition, and employees have been sworn to secrecy. Components were purchased through front companies, military personnel and officials came without uniforms, and employees were regularly polygraph tested. In fact, the program was kept in the shadows even from the U.S. Government Accountability Office and members of Congress until the mid-1980s. In 1988, the B-2 was finally unveiled at the United States Air Force Plant 42 in Palmdale, California, although even this viewing was strictly limited, not allowing guests to see the rear of the B-2. The program has been the subject of regular controversy due to its outrageous cost to American taxpayers. In 1996, the Government Accountability Office said the Spirit bomber would be the most expensive bomber to operate on a per-aircraft basis, costing 3 times as much as the B-1B, which cost $9.6 million to maintain at the time, and 4 times as much as the B-52H, which cost the Americans $6.8 million per year to maintain. Maintenance costs were about $3.4 million for each of the 21 aircraft in service by the early 2000s, and the average price of one stealth bomber in the program by today's standards exceeds $4.17 billion, taking into account development, design, testing, production, and procurement. By the fall of 1997, every hour of B-2 flight required 119 hours of maintenance, and its maintenance required specially equipped air-conditioned hangars. The reason? Its stealth skin, of course, whose secret is still hidden in the highest offices of the U.S. Low observability gave the B-2 enormous freedom of operation at high altitudes, thereby increasing both the range and field of view for its onboard sensors. The bomber is literally made up of many curved and rounded surfaces all over its open airframe to deflect radar beams, a technique better known as continuous curvature, made possible by advances in computational fluid dynamics, and was first tested by the Northrop team on their Tacit Blue experimental vehicle. Despite the reduction in ammunition of other bombers after the collapse of the USSR, the B-2 Spirit not only remained fully armed with nuclear weapons, but also got a couple of new aces up its sleeve. For example, it increased the maximum capacity of the carrier to 80 JDAMs and also received the equipment necessary to destroy the deepest and most fortified enemy bunkers. Unfortunately, the U.S. Air Force's Spirit fleet is not getting any younger. Clearly aware of this, the service issued a request for proposals for a new strategic bomber back in 2014. And a year later, it chose the same Northrop Grumman, who offered the military an excellent combination of advanced characteristics and an affordable price in an even more innovative stealth airframe, the B-21 Raider. Although it's an open question whether the sum of $203 billion allocated for a 30-year period of development, procurement, and operation of a fleet of 100 B-21 can be called acceptable, after all, based on this figure, the price of one Raider will be more than $700 million. At first glance, the B-21 is the same B-2, but only in profile. However, when it comes to creating a stealthy flying wing design, there are a few ways to reinvent the wheel. The Raider's potential, like its innovative air intakes, lies deep within the body. First of all, it will almost certainly have a higher operational ceiling than its predecessor. Operating above 50,000 feet will eliminate the possibility of the B-21 being detected by marauding enemy fighters or airborne early warning aircraft. Considering how often statements have been made that the new bomber is a completely independent unit, capable of doing without enhanced logistical support, one can conclude that it has an even greater range without refueling. And the new B-21's exterior is yet another example of how decades of materials, science, and computer-aided design have paid off for the Northrop team. They've learned how to build and assemble even the largest composite components, eliminating the need for dozens or even hundreds of joints and seams throughout the fuselage. This, among other things, will become one of the most important factors in the matter of Raider's stealthiness. After all, covering such a seamless body with a layer of secret radar-absorbing material has become even more convenient. Many will rightly note that due to the smaller dimensions, the ability to carry dozens of rounds of ammunition will suffer greatly. But tell me this, what will the enemy be more afraid of? 19 B-2 Spirits carrying 2 massive ordnance penetrators each, or 100 fresh B-21 Raiders carrying 1 such munition each? Additionally, these aircraft will operate in conjunction with American 6th-generation fighters of the Next Generation Air Dominance program, as well as swarming drones which will ultimately multiply their nuclear argumentation in the eyes of many opponents. By the 2040s, the U.S. Air Force intends to replace 45 B-1 Lancers and 19 B-2 Spirits with new stealth bombers. So all that remains for us to do is watch with bated breath the future that has already arrived. Now it's your turn to tell us which of the American bombers is your favorite. Maybe it wasn't even in this video. Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell for more content like today's. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.